He was the face of American heroism, a man whose wartime actions were so unbelievable, Hollywood had to tone them down just to make them plausible. He wore every medal for valor the United States had to offer, pinned to the chest of a man who looked less like a warrior and more like a boy. He climbed onto a tank destroyer that was actively exploding, ignored a leg wound, and, for a full hour, single-handedly held off an entire German company, saving his unit from annihilation. That man was Audie Murphy. But the story we were told, the legend of the scrappy sharecropper who became the most decorated soldier of World War II, the movie star, the American icon, is only half the truth. What happens when the fighting stops, but the war inside never ends? This is the story of the silence, the struggle, and the ultimate courage required to fight the invisible enemy long after the last bullet was fired. The weight of poverty. Audie Leon Murphy was born in 1925 in Kingston, Texas, into a life of abject poverty. He was one of 12 children, many of whom did not survive infancy. The family were sharecroppers, trapped in a brutal cycle of debt and hunger. By the time he was a teenager, Audie knew intimately the feeling of an empty stomach. His formal education ended in the 5th grade, when he had to quit school to help support the family. His most critical childhood skill wasn't reading or writing, but the deadly accuracy he developed with a rifle. Hunting rabbits and squirrels wasn't a sport, it was survival. That rifle, and the ability to hit a target precisely and quickly, became the only practical training he would receive for the war to come. This early environment hardened him, giving him a stillness and a ruthless focus that was rare, even among veteran soldiers. The death of his mother in 1941, shortly before Pearl Harbor, left the 16-year-old an orphan and the de facto head of the household. It was a trauma that compounded his sense of isolation and responsibility, fueling his desperate need to escape poverty and secure a future for his younger siblings. Lying to get to war. When the United States entered World War II, Murphy was consumed by the urge to enlist. He was driven partly by patriotism, but primarily by a desire for the steady paychecks that could help his family. He tried to join the Marines and the Navy, but both rejected the 5'5", 110-pound boy for being underweight and undersized. He was finally accepted by the U.S. Army in 1942, but only after his sister, Corinne, helped him forge his birth certificate to look older than his true 17 years. The greatest military hero in American history had to lie just to get in the door. He shipped out for North Africa as part of the 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, a unit that would soon become known for its resilience and relentless fighting. The grinding campaign from the invasion of Sicily in 1943 to the relentless grind through Italy and into France, Murphy was tested daily. His early exposure to combat was a baptism of fire that immediately revealed his unnatural aptitude for war. He didn't panic, he analyzed. He wasn't reckless. He was simply incapable of retreating if a strategic opportunity presented itself. His unit landed at Anzio, where the Italian campaign devolved into months of brutal, static trench warfare, a gruesome, demoralizing stalemate. It was here, amidst the mud and constant shelling, that many men broke. Murphy, however, only grew more dangerous. He became known for his aggressive patrolling, often leading small teams on dangerous recon missions that invariably ended with a successful enemy engagement or capture. His quick rise through the ranks, from private to staff sergeant, was based on simple battlefield attrition. His superiors kept getting killed, and Murphy kept taking command. By the time the 3rd Division reached France, Murphy had been wounded, battled malaria, and participated in some of the war's most brutal fighting. In October 1944, at the Lamette Quarry near Clury, he displayed the kind of calculated fury that defined his legend. After German soldiers ambushed his company, killing his best friend, Murphy single-handedly charged the German position. He seized a captured German machine gun and, using it with devastating effect, silenced the enemy crew, earning him the Silver Star. His battlefield commission to 2nd lieutenant soon followed, a recognition that his tactical brilliance outweighed his lack of formal officer training. The Colmar Pocket. By January 1945, the European theatre was frozen, literally. In the Colmar Pocket of eastern France, the conditions were bitter, and the German forces, though cornered, launched a final, desperate counteroffensive. 2nd Lieutenant Murphy's Company B of the 15th Infantry was reduced to a fraction of its strength, a mere 19 men remaining. On January 26, 1945, near the village of Holtzwihr, the full, terrifying might of the German counterattack materialized. 6 heavy Panzer tanks, supported by 2 full companies of German mountain troops, crashed through the forest. The American position was quickly overwhelmed. Machine gun fire ripped through the trees. Murphy, seeing the imminent destruction of his entire company, did the only thing he could. He ordered his exhausted men to retreat to a defensive position in the nearby woods. The burning tank destroyer, as they withdrew, an American M10 tank destroyer, positioned slightly ahead, took a direct hit. The explosion killed some of its crew and wounded the rest, forcing them to bail out. The vehicle was immediately engulfed in flames, its ammunition cooking off in sporadic bursts. Crucially, the tank destroyer, though useless for driving, still had its large 50 caliber machine gun mounted on its exposed turret, the perfect weapon for heavy, suppressive fire. With the enemy infantry closing in and the German tanks poised to roll over his retreat path, Murphy made a choice that military strategists still debate today, a calculated sacrifice. Instead of retreating, he ran toward the burning machine, climbed onto the turret, and manned the 50 caliber gun. He was exposed on all sides, alone. Tiny targets silhouetted against the blinding white snow and the inferno of the burning vehicle. For the next hour, Murphy held the line. "I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." The action was a masterclass in controlled carnage. He ignored the searing pain of a fresh leg wound, pouring continuous, sustained fire into the German infantry. He constantly traversed the gun, mowing down wave after wave of advancing troops, forcing the enemy armor to hold back, hesitant to expose their supporting infantry. When the German fire became too heavy, he would duck behind the turret shield to direct artillery fire via his field telephone. It was during this intense exchange that one of the war's most famous lines was born. When the artillery commander, worried about the proximity of the shelling, asked how close the rounds were landing to Murphy, the second lieutenant famously yelled into the phone, "Just hold the phone, and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." Murphy's desperate, hour-long stand inflicted devastating casualties, killing or wounding an estimated 50 German soldiers. His resolve finally broke the attack, forcing the Panzer tanks to retreat. Only when his ammunition ran completely dry, and the flames began to threaten the fuel lines, did he descend. The tank destroyer exploded in a catastrophic blast moments after he jumped off. He then limped back to his stunned company, refusing medical attention until he had organized a counterattack. For this single action, Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor, completing his collection of every military combat award the United States Army had to offer, a distinction almost unmatched in U.S. history. The burden of the icon. When Murphy returned home in 1945, he was not the boy who left. He was a deeply scarred, profoundly lost veteran who had spent over 400 days on the front lines. He was hailed as a national icon, celebrated in ticker tape parades, and featured on the cover of Life magazine. Actor James Cagney saw potential in the shy, handsome war hero and invited him to Hollywood. Audie Murphy embarked on an improbable 20-year film career, starring in 44 movies, mostly westerns. The ultimate irony, however, was his signature role, playing himself in the 1955 film adaptation of his autobiography, To Hell and Back. The man, struggling nightly with what was then called shell shock or combat fatigue, was forced to relive his most horrifying moments, for the sake of fame, blurring the line between the soldier he was and the hero the public demanded. The invisible enemy behind the boyish, quiet facade lay the profound damage of severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The internal war was far crueler than the one he fought overseas. His night terrors were legendary among his family and friends. He couldn't sleep without a loaded pistol under his pillow, and, tragically, on several occasions, he woke up mid-terror, holding his wife at gunpoint. The constant stress contributed to the failure of his short first marriage and strained his second. He carried immense, paralyzing guilt for the men who died under his command and the staggering number of enemies he had been forced to kill. To cope, Murphy developed a severe addiction to the sedative Placidin. The addiction was powerful, but in the ultimate display of his warrior's resolve, he locked himself in a hotel room for a week and fought his dependence cold turkey, enduring excruciating withdrawal symptoms rather than becoming enslaved to a pill. This private victory over chemical dependence was arguably a more difficult battle than any he faced in Europe. The psychological disconnect between the gentle, struggling private man and the public. clean-cut icon of American innocence, was excruciatingly difficult to bear. The voice of truth. In the last years of his life, despite increasing financial troubles stemming from poor business decisions and exploitation, Murphy transformed his personal struggle into a new, crucial form of heroism: advocacy. In the late 1960s, long before PTSD was a common term, and at a time when veterans returning from Vietnam were being marginalized, Audie Murphy publicly broke the soldier's code of silence. He realized his fame and status as the most decorated soldier gave him a platform no one else had. In 1968, he issued a powerful public plea, demanding that the U.S. government recognize and properly fund care for veterans suffering from mental health issues. He stated that he and thousands of others were being swept under the rug because their wounds were not visible. This statement was a revolutionary act of courage. It came from the very definition of a tough, decorated warrior. And by declaring his own vulnerability, he gave permission to thousands of struggling veterans to seek help without shame. Unwavering conviction. Throughout his post-war celebrity, Murphy maintained an extraordinary ethical conviction. Despite severe financial distress, he repeatedly and emphatically turned down lucrative contracts to endorse alcohol and tobacco products. He refused to leverage his heroic, trustworthy image to promote products he felt would damage the very people, especially young men and veterans, who looked up to him. This quiet, steadfast moral stance proved that even in his darkest moments, his internal compass remained fixed on service and integrity. The price of Valor. Audie Murphy died tragically young, on May 28, 1971, in a private plane crash near Roanoke, Virginia, while on a business trip. His death robbed the country of a powerful advocate, just as the Vietnam War was winding down and the need for veteran support was reaching a crisis point. He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery, his gravesite the second most visited after President John F. Kennedy. His simple government-issued gravestone makes no mention of his Medal of Honor. Per his request, and final act of humility from a man burdened by accolades, the story of Audie Murphy is a profound meditation on the price of valor. It shows us that courage isn't the absence of trauma, but the capacity to continue fighting, whether against a German armored attack or against the demons within. His greatest legacy isn't the Medal of Honor or the 44 films he made, but the voice he used, however painful the effort, to shine a light on the darkest, least talked about consequence of war. He saved his company once, but by sharing his truth, he may have saved countless others, proving that a hero keeps fighting for those who can no longer fight for themselves.